about OER opportunities, and I have some tools to show you and just some things that I hope are helpful. But I thought I could show you these things and it would leave plenty of time for discussion. I would also like to know if these things aren't exactly what you were thinking of when you signed up for something like this, what would be helpful, because we hope to just sort of build a support environment for OER is what we're hoping for. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Suzanne Mangrum. I'm an acquisitions librarian at Walker Library. I'm in the process now of doing an OER certification for to be an OER librarian through one of the organizations we'll be talking about today, through the Open Textbook Network. So I've been learning a lot. I think it's really invigorated me at this mid-career point to do something about textbook affordability. But I'm also here to purchase eBooks and streaming media and other things to support courses. And today, oh, there we go. I'm hoping we can talk about how I think OER is useful. I'd like to talk about why I think it's useful for libraries, but I'll save that for another day. But how it's useful for faculty, for students. We'll talk about what it is and why it matters. And then I have 3 tools in particular that I kind of just wanted to walk through that I think are a good entry point. And then 3 other tools that would be great. But like I said, I'm trying to keep this not too long. And then I've created a reference guide with lots of links for lots of tools, all the tools I'm gonna go through, and even more tools. And then I'm hoping we can have a discussion on what questions you may have about it, and I could try to use some of it live. I will admit I was a weenie and I did screenshots for everything, but we could open up some of these and try them and just have a discussion. So first, we know what is OER, and chances are you know, and you've seen something about it, but just to go over a definition to get us started, I like the one from Creative Commons. Open educational resources, or OER, are teaching, learning research materials that are in the public domain, or, this is the important part, licensed in a manner that provides everyone with free and perpetual permission to engage in the 5R activities. And, you know, perpetual is enough to make every librarian here cheer, right? But the 5R activities, what does that mean? And I think this kind of gets at the heart of OER. You know it's an OER if you are able to retain it. You can keep it. You can have the copy forever. If you can reuse it, you can use it next year, next semester, next class. A version of that, the original version, it's yours. You can revise it. You can edit it. You can change it. You can mix it up. You can modify the resource and still use it. You can combine the original OER with, you know, your course material, your personal material, other existing OER material, and create something new. And it's still free and you could still retain it. And you also have the right to redistribute an OER, which means you can share this with every student you have, with faculty members. It can be the original, it can be the revised, it could be remixed, it could be a piece of it, but it's shareable, it's open. And again, you know, this is also from the Creative Commons, and I recommend going here for more information. We're not going to be able to talk about the licensing part today, but if you are interested in the Creative Commons licensing process and knowing more about it, here's a link for that. And they, you know, you might be familiar with these gray boxes, but they go through and have nice definitions for every one of them. You can click into it and read the actual license. So if you want more information, this is where you go. I want to talk a moment about why bother in the first place. OER is near and dear to my heart. It's something that I don't think many of us could be against, but it's just the idea that information should be open and freely available, that information is strongest when it's there for everyone, that education is better when it's open and available to everyone. And there's a lot about the open educational movement and OER and the benefits of open pedagogy that we won't talk about today, but I highly recommend this TED Talk from David Wiley. It's worth 15 minutes of your life. He gives a really good introduction to what the open movement is and why it's something that educators should care about. What I do want to spend a few minutes talking about today is textbook affordability and removing barriers for our students. And the information I want to present quickly is from a new report that came out in June called Fixing the Broken Textbook Market. It was a survey conducted last fall on 83 campuses, and it was carried out by the U.S. PIRG Education Fund, the Public Interest Research Group. They did this original survey in 2014, and this is a follow-up survey that they've just completed. And it covers 19 states. I didn't see that it covered Tennessee, and it has a data set of almost 4,000 students. And before I do this, I also want to say that I can show you the key findings and the beautiful infographics because they openly licensed everything, yay. So I just pulled out some of their really cool infographics that I want to show you just to give you the rundown. 63% of students skipped buying or renting a textbook. So more than half have not bothered getting the textbook. 17% of students reported skipping buying an access code. That's getting close to like 1 in 5 students. And, as I think we all know, an access code is a lifeline for a class. I don't see how a student could pass a class without an access code, but a lot of them aren't getting them. And of those students who did not get the access code, 90% of those students worried that forgoing these course materials would negatively impact their grade. They know that this is detrimental to their education, but they're doing it anyway. You have to ask why. And I think they sum this up beautifully, that students have always made hard choices to complete their degree, but because of the high cost of access codes, many of them need to decide if they can afford an A or if they will settle for a C. And that's not how higher education is supposed to work. And I'm not going to give you more of their statistics or their findings, but I would recommend that report. They have a nice executive summary, but I want to say that I don't have the hard numbers for MTSU. That's something I want to work on, but we do know that this is happening here. I would like to quote our President McPhee, and at the White House last week when he was talking about MTSU, he said that 40% of our students are low income. And we also know from a Tennessee survey done of community colleges that students are spending on average about $1,500 a year on textbook material. And it's not that it's an unplanned cost, but some things are unexpectedly high. And we know this from talking to our students, that they might have been expecting 10, 15 fees tacked on to their tuition, but they're really finding that it's more like 20. It's just more than they expected. And they're having to make a choice between buying a textbook or doing something else, choosing to take on more debt or not. Can they afford the debt? Do they have the credit to take on the debt? We know that they are sharing textbooks instead of buying them. That's very common, but that means they're not going to have access to their course material when they need it, that they're going to have to see if that friend is in the dorm room or, make sure their relationships hold up. And we also hear on our campus of students choosing courses and even majors based on the cost. That is very worrisome. It points to an equity issue in education because it's basically saying you have to have this level economic security to get through this major. And if you don't have it, you're better off elsewhere. And, we need to do what we can to remove those barriers. And the library is really excited to be working on a textbook program and supporting finding OER. And we're hoping to build more of an infrastructure to support faculty in choosing OER. So how do we do that, and where do we go from here? I think the high cost of textbooks, it's kind of a well-known elephant in the room, right? We know it, we know it's there. I think what gets scary is, what are we going to do about it? Or, you know, are you saying that I need to give up my textbook and totally recreate all my course materials and make everything available to my students for free and totally write stuff from scratch? And that can be overwhelming and terrifying. We did get a taste of this during the pandemic, but that's kind of cold comfort, right? And because I like to mix my metaphors, you know, they say, like, how do you eat an elephant one step at a time? But still, I think that's really daunting. It's a daunting, scary task. So what we're hoping to do, and what we want to talk about today, is to say that we're trying to help. It is daunting. We are at the infancy of trying to do more with OER collectively at MTSU. And I like to think of it more as we're trying to build something. We're trying to make something between the instructional designers, between the faculty, between the library, that can help support finding and using OER. So before we start looking at our tools and speaking of support structures, I want to recommend this website from the instructional design team in the University College. Kim Godwin did a webinar not long ago on OER, and she showed this checklist. It's a very good webinar, and I think this checklist that they have at the University College and their MTSU Online Distance Ed webpage is a good thing to start with. I think it's useful before you start looking at OER to kind of have an idea of what is quality, what is not. And sometimes just looking at a list like this and having it with you can help you when you're going in to say, you know, you have the subject expertise, but is this any good? So I want to point people to that. And now I want to just go through some OER tools. The first two we're going to look at are repositories that I think are really excellent entry points into OER land. And the third one I'm really excited about is a library resource that we have that will help you to look at OER and DRM-free multi-user eBooks at the same time. So let's look at some of these. OpenStax is probably, I think, the most well-known OER repository out there. They're sort of like the Cadillac of OER land. They're part of Rice University, and they have gabolas of support, of funding, and I think they've used it well. They are the most similar to a traditional publisher. When you look, if I looked at the subjects, I'm really small here. If I looked at the subjects page there, you see all their books. They have, you know, those are your subjects, and then boom, here are textbooks that you could have right now and go. You could go download them while I'm talking. And the good thing is that students have access to the online version of the textbook right away. And they get to keep it forever. Also, if you click into these, like if I go into American Government, it will say obtain a print copy, and it takes you to Amazon. So you can get a print copy of the textbook if that's what you prefer, hardcover, paperback. And it's, you know, they're a nonprofit, so you're paying for the cost of producing this textbook. But for those who want them, they're available that way. Also, all of their textbooks are peer-reviewed in a very similar fashion to any other publishing company. If you go into the books, you can see all of the contributing authors, all the reviewers. I'm not sure how OpenStax commissions or begins a work, but I think they seek out authors. Also, one issue with OER are all the support materials. You know, like 3 textbook companies control 80% of the textbook market. And they can do that in a lot of ways because they have a gigantic support structure of not just the textbook, but the test banks, the solutions manuals, the homework guides, the slides. They have everything for the professors and the students. They have a whole world. And especially, you know, in the math and sciences, they depend on that to get through the course. And OpenStax, they're starting to tackle that issue. So they have created math homework, test banks and tutoring and study guides that are similar to what you would find with a traditional publisher like from McGraw-Hill. So there are other companies that do this like Lumen Learning. I wish I knew more. If professors see this as comparable, it's something I'd like to find out, but they have the money, they have the resources to kind of tackle this problem and start creating that side of textbooks that have caused us to rely on access codes until now. And the cons I would say about OpenStax is that they don't have a lot of material. What they have is very good, but the selection can be limited. Like when you go to Humanities, you see 2 sad little textbooks available. The next repository I'd like to look at is the Open Textbook Library. We are now a member of the Open Textbook Network. This is where I'm getting my training right now for my certification program. The Open Textbook Library is from the University of Minnesota, and they are making huge efforts now to reach out and to make themselves known across US campuses to train instructional designers, faculty, and librarians to pull people on board to kind of build that infrastructure like OpenStax kind of already has. We will be doing an Open Textbook Network training this fall. Well, they were going to come to campus, but now we'll be doing virtually, but we'll have more training on this in the fall. In order to publish a book with OpenStax, with Open Textbook Library, there is a barrier in that you need to be affiliated with some way in higher ed. You need to have a work that's being used in higher ed. You need to be associated with the higher ed institution, you know, as a professor, or with a scholarly society or professional organization. So that's important. We want this to be free and open, but sadly, you need some of these barriers to protect all of us from predatory publishing. So I think that's a safety net and, in my opinion, a mark of quality, just to let you know. But if we go in and start looking at their books, I chose to look at Humanities to see if there were more options, and there are. You can see you have arts, history, languages, and I chose to go with the first one and look at arts. And let's see if I can go over here. It's like a mix in art. It's music, theater, all kinds of things. I, again, chose the first item on the list to look at. Music on the move. Oh, and I would say the first thing I noticed is that there are no reviews. I wondered what that meant. So that's not super promising. So I look more, and it's published by Ohio State University Libraries. And to me, that's like, oh, someone put this in a repository maybe? I don't know. I looked at it a little further. And at this point, I want to go back to Kim Godwin's forum. There's nothing else for it. It's there, it's available. Is it any good? We have to decide. We have to start looking at the content. You know, and I'm trained as a librarian. I know something of the publishing industry. I know something of standards and collection building, but I'm not a subject specialist. So this is part of the daunting task in OER. We just need to start looking at it. But even I, a non-subject expert, can start taking a look. And I noticed that I looked up the author, Danielle Fossler-Lucier. She's the chair of graduate studies in musicology in Ohio State. She's probably legit, right? This isn't just just some fly-by-night things. I also looked at obtaining a print copy, and interestingly, it is available from the University of Michigan Press, and I don't know if you can see it, it's small there. It's an open access version made available through the Tome Initiative, which is another big OER open access initiative between the ACRL and scholarly publishing companies. So this is pretty awesome. It actually, oh, I'm sorry, it looks really good. It has some, you know, just some regular book jacket thing, but not a formal review. But also you can see it was published in 2020, so it hasn't been around for long. So that's something that I thought looked pretty promising from the Open Textbook Network. Okay, so my last tool that I want to show, I'm very excited about. I think Denise is here. Denise built this webpage for us, but we have available at the library now Faculty Select from EBSCO. This is a repository of OER and multi-user, mostly DRM-free eBooks that you can search all in one place. So here is our URL. You can find it under library services for faculty. I'll try to highlight that later, exactly where it is on the site if we have time. If you go in here to access Faculty Select, you'll actually be taken to a screen that says, do you want to bookmark this page or go forward? You can choose. So to give you some idea, we're looking at eBooks and OER, and they're not all eBooks. It's not everything, but they're eBooks from EBSCO, from their front list, which is a variety of publishers. EBSCO is an aggregator. It took me a minute. An aggregator that pulls lots of publishers together to offer things. We also have Taylor and Francis, Wiley, and Cambridge. So that's what you'll be searching. And in the OER area, they're searching the Open Textbook Network, which we just looked at. The SUNY Open Textbooks, they're pretty awesome. Open BC from British Columbia Textbooks. Open, which is the European version of the Open Textbook Network. They do a lot of the open access, open source stuff from European publishers, and they're trying to get more. But right now, that's what we have. So if you go to the, I kind of skipped over this, but once you click on Access Faculty Select and you go to a search screen, you can put in a keyword. You can choose other things like author, but not subject that I saw. But really, if you're trying to explore OER, you probably want to start with keyword. One thing I like about it is that they do kind of give you some search term help, which I wanted to do Spanish language acquisition, but I found over doing a few searches that Spanish language learning was what's the better term. And then this is what you see. You see mostly we're seeing eBooks. I'm not seeing OER in the top list, but you have to be willing to go over here to this left bar and kind of work with some facets. So if we're just going to look at eBooks first, but if you wanted to just look at OER, you could, let me go back. You could do that here, and we'll do that in a minute. But you can also see what subjects you're getting, what providers they're showing you, and you know, this is new. I'm not really crazy about their subject list, but it kind of gives you an idea if you're in the right place or not and what languages you can search. But just to show you, if I want to preview the ebook, I can just click right there. And even though the library doesn't own this ebook, we kind of have Faculty Select buried on a For Services page because the publisher has agreed to allow anyone who subscribes to Faculty Select to have the full ebook so that you can review it. You can look at every page, look at the table of contents and decide, is this for you or not, right? And if you like it, you can request that we purchase a copy. So you just have to fill out this form, and then it goes to me, the acquisitions librarian, my staff, and we'll get it for you, and we'll let you know when it's here. So that's a cool option. But I also want to say it's not perfect. I was interested, I went, you can barely see it, but I went down here to look at just the Cambridge stuff. We actually have a Cambridge package of eBooks. I wanted to see if they would let me preview it, and they won't. Cambridge has decided not to open up all their books, you know, for everyone to preview. So you could only request an item to purchase. But I wondered, it's a new product, and I think they should be able to do this, and I hope they improve it, but it's not letting you know that, yeah, you already own this. Because I thought, oh, we should have this Cambridge stuff. And we do. When I looked it up in the catalog, we own the Cambridge. So if it's a university press title or a Cambridge title, you may want to check our catalog, because there's a good chance we have those. But in worst case scenario, you fill out a request, we let you know, yeah, we have that, here it is, you know, but still, I wish it did a little better, and I have hopes it will improve sooner rather than later. It's a pretty new product. But if we want to just go back and look at the OER, say I'm not seeing OER, I could do that. And I got some, like I said, I did screenshots because I'm a scaredy cat, but there were things about Spanish language and cinema and like more narrow topics, but I saw two like general textbooks that caught my eye. So I just took the first one, Libro Libre, and it is an open textbook library textbook from 2018. So if we look at that, oh, I'm sorry, if we want to go look at that ebook, you have to say if you're going to preview it, even though you could go to the open textbook library website and go look at it, or if you want to receive a course-friendly link, but if you just want to preview it, it takes you to the open textbook library where we just were. And we can see this time, this book has reviews. So I want to point out that as you could look at the PDF, you could look at everything about the book, see the table of contents, but you can also see all the reviews. And these aren't just, they look like Amazon with the star rating, but it's more than that. If you do a review for Faculty Select, it's going to be very similar to the checklist that Kim Godwin provided. It is a very thorough review by other faculty. So that, I think, is another reason I like open textbook library. It's got good stuff. And if you decide you want it, you can click on this to fill out a form, and we'll give you a link. Of course, it's an open textbook. You don't have to do that. You could just go get the PDF and put the link on yourself. But it would, that's another conversation, but it would help us to track of what's being used. So there's something for your consideration. So there's so much more, but I don't want to keep going through example after example and wearing people out, but I have to give these three, I just have one screenshot for each as a shout out because I think they're so awesome. If you're here today and you were looking more for assignments or lectures and not textbooks, these have some things for you. The MIT OpenCourseWare, I like to use the Educator Portal. You can look for things by subject and then content. Do you want assignments? Do you want lectures? Do you want videos? Do you want exams? And then if you choose assignments, do you want assignments with solutions, problem sets with solutions or without, presentations with examples? It's MIT. So, I mean, we're talking STEM stuff for the most part, but it's pretty amazing. The other one I wanted to point out is OER Commons. It's very popular with a lot of teaching faculty as well as Rebus community. You could also look at things by material type and even education standards. I can get lost in OER Commons very quickly, but I'm a librarian and I deal mostly with, published works or streaming media. So if you're a professor and you're looking for more, I'm looking for lesson plans, OER Commons is a great place to go. And the last one I want to give a shout out to is the George Mason OER Meta Finder. And for the librarians, like, federated searching is still alive. This is a federated searching tool that they created at George Mason Libraries. And my only suggestion is, if you're going to look for OER this way, click all categories, because what it's doing is it's searching all of these repositories simultaneously and then compiling all the hits into one list for you. Do not do the deeper search. You will be buried in Library of Congress between the Library of Congress and the American Memory Project, unless you're a history professor and you want to do that. I wouldn't do it. Other than that, I really like this resource. I think it's easier for me to get started by going into OpenStax and really digging in and exploring what they have and what they don't, or Open Textbook Library or one, and then using something like this, because it can get overwhelming. The result list can get pretty massive. But I wanted to stop there, and yeah, I did go longer than I intended to, so I'm sorry about that. But I wanted to see if I could answer any questions, show anybody any examples if they wanted. I also made, I'll send this out afterwards, I also made a quick guide, and I have even more OER resources that we didn't go today. There's like Merlot and the Rebus community, and also some schools who are doing really amazing assignments and open education programs that are worth looking at. So that's there too. But for now, and does anybody have any questions or comments or any other OER things to consider?